Hey guys, doing something a little different today. I really wanted to get some of the grinding from Chocobo's Forest out of the way, but it's not really something you'd make an episode out of. So I thought maybe I would use the time instead of just commenting, oh look, here's a treasure, here's a treasure, here's a treasure, to talk about things I've been reflecting on lately. I just want to get it out there. It helps me sort out my thoughts, and I'm curious if anyone else has had experiences that are similar to the kinds that I've had. A lot of times we're more similar to each other than we are dissimilar. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but I was able to upgrade my microphone. It's something that had been bothering me the whole time. My one I was using was like 8 years old. With my new microphone, I think it'll enhance the experience for y'all, and I'm happy to be able to provide that for you. But anyway, I was thinking about a segment in my life where I was having an all around hard time. A lot was out of my control. I think I really felt like a victim of circumstance. And I don't mean like I had a victim mentality, but I know people say like, oh, life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you or with you or whatever. I think sometimes life does happen to you. And not always, and I think it's important to not get stuck in that mentality, but it's important to acknowledge, in my humble opinion, that yeah, sometimes life just happens to you, and you can't have prevented, the things that get thrown your way. You're just there, and you have to deal with it, and you kind of can't do anything about it. And sometimes we face problems that they can't be fixed. So when I was experiencing a stretch of stuff that was just like out of my control, I think what made it the most difficult to go through was that I was effectively alone. Yeah, there were like others in my life, but they were people I didn't really like have a deep connection to, and they weren't really what I needed. I mean, sometimes I think our friends are friends of convenience. Not that they're people that don't matter, but just you become friends because they're kind of like around you, not necessarily because you have a lot in common. And during this time in my life, that was definitely my circumstance. Like, I had, quote, friends who, like, I didn't really have a solid relationship with. They were just people that I was around frequently. I didn't feel that connection, and we weren't really, like, there for each other in the way that, like, a genuine friend would be. So I was effectively alone. During this stretch, I came to a crisis where I did not have a place to live. I was working full time, but the economy and the whole like housing situation in that area where I was living was such that like even with a full-time job, like I could not afford rent. And this was like almost 10 years ago. It's more extreme now, so I think this is relatable to say the least, which is sad. I wish it wasn't relatable, but here we are. So I didn't have a place to live, and my rent checks had bounced like for 3 months in a row, and I knew like, yeah, somebody was gonna say something, and I knew something was gonna give, and I knew that I was going to go somewhere because I literally had to, but I had no idea where, and I knew I would get myself there, but I had no idea how. I was fortunate enough to also be in therapy at this time, so that gave me some structure, but obviously, like, a therapist isn't gonna get you a house or a job that pays you a living wage. Like, they can support you, but they can't, like, change that aspect, They can't move the economy around, though I'm sure they would love to. So when I was going through it, at that time, I was reflecting on older experiences that I had already survived. And like those gave me an indicator that I was capable of somehow dragging myself forward still, even through this one. I just knew that I was capable, I'd done it before, and I'll figure it out. whatever it is. And I did get somewhere. I was able to move somewhere else with family, and I snagged a tip job that helped me stay afloat better. And I don't know if you know this, but I was a college dropout for a while due to multiple reasons. A contributing factor would be the cost, but there were other factors. So I decided to go back to school when I moved with family, and I went on a whim. It was from the lightest encouragement from another person. It didn't really take me much convincing because I had no idea what to do with myself. It was something to give my life like a foundation, not for success or anything, but for how to fill my day and my time, and to give me like a sense of internal stability. So I went back to school. But during this time, I was really traumatized from the whole shebang of, having previously not had a place to live, not being able to afford food, and other circumstances, which I will not go into detail. I was really hurt by what I had gone through, and even though I wasn't in the worst of it anymore, I felt like I was an open wound. I felt like I was like raw skin and I was gonna bleed if anything scraped me. I know that sounds like nasty, but I feel like if you've experienced that, you can kind of understand like how that feels in your mind and body. So in my new college I was going back to, I learned about a meditation class that like you could actually get credit for, which is a little bizarre but kind of awesome. And I enrolled and started taking this meditation class. And my assignments in this class were essentially different ways of sitting with myself, looking within myself, in all different methods. Well, like, for example, one was to pay attention how you feel when you approach a door, when you're going through a door, and when you are finished going through the door. Which, it sounds like, why would there even be a difference in the first place? But if you're like really, really, really present, you do notice different things. It could just be like the temperature or the sound. Like all those are feedback that your environment's giving you that we like shut out, and like forcing yourself to be like that present is like beneficial to your psyche. I took the class for stress management because of how traumatized I was from the whole slew of things that I had just escaped. But I got more than stress management out of it, which I definitely learned how to manage my stress, but I started to realize that when you sit alone with yourself, you just kind of learn and realize stuff. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but I was like learning things similarly how I did when like I was in therapy. Obviously meditation is not a replacement for therapy, but I noticed from having experienced both, there were benefits there. And I just kind of like would figure out stuff about myself or just understand stuff about myself, even though I wasn't like having like a talk session with a licensed therapist, which I thought was strange and cool and kind of weird and terrifying, but really helpful. From like doing this and going through like the semester, I started to develop an understanding of like my gut knowledge, gut wisdom. I don't know what you call it. It's like that feeling when like it's easy to associate if something bad's about to happen, like, oh, you get a sinking feeling, but sometimes it's the other way. It's like there's something good and you're like, oh, like I should go do that, or I should say this, or I should go tour away this thing. It doesn't really make logical sense most of the time, but it also somehow kind of turns out to be right. And I don't really understand why. Maybe it's just like our instincts that we're not really connected with since we are the animals. But I started to become aware of that. And after more and more time and more experiences, I realized that there were so many instances in the past where my gut was trying to get me to do things differently than I did. And I had just kind of ignored that sinking feeling that I would get from time to time. Maybe it was like too hard to distinguish from anxiety at the time, from which I really suffered. And like I dealt with chronic anxiety for many years. But looking back, like, hindsight's 2020, which reminds me of this YouTuber I follow called Hindz. He's one of my favorites. You should really check him out. I will try to remember to include a link to his channel in the description. It's like, well, I mean, he calls it, he's the number one chill spot on the internet, and it absolutely is. I think everybody can benefit from his vibes. But hindsight's 2020, and looking back, I can see how there were times where I was thrown into a really difficult situation because I wasn't equipped with different tools to prevent those situations, or they were just straight out of my control. And then because I also internally didn't have the tools to handle those situations, I made it all worse. Then I was faced with something. There was a small part of me that was responsible for how my life had gone. I had been there for me every step of the way, if that doesn't sound too meta. But I didn't take my own help. And this is not to say, like, victim blaming in any way is okay. It certainly is not. And people who do wrong to others are 100% responsible for that, not victims, just making that clear. I'm talking about only myself, not anybody else's lives. Just wanted to stress that. But yeah, I had gotten these gut reactions trying to help me from me, and I ignored it. I guess a lot of our response to life is like social conditioning, our background, how we grew up. It all shapes and influences our perspective, but it does not force our perspective. That said, when I realized that part of my present was in my control and I just kept being too naive and not learning, I realized that my present, like where I was, in part, was kind of a reflection of me. And I didn't like that. And it made me wonder, if I don't like where my life is right now, does that mean I don't like me? After all, I responded to the environment I was thrown in, and that got me here. It can be really hard to accept that some of the twists and turns our life has taken is due to how we respond to our situations. It feels really sour in my stomach, but it also feels resonant and true. It was from all of this stuff that I was thinking about that I started to realize that all this time, I actually had self-worth issues. It was not obvious, though. It went under the radar for such a long time. When I later developed and redeveloped healthy friendships and opened up about this fact, people were really surprised. They said that, like, I never seemed that way, or I never gave off the vibe that I felt poorly about myself. People would say, like, you seem so grounded and confident. I never gave off the vibe that I saw myself poorly. Not even to me. And I don't mean that I didn't respect myself or anything like that. I most certainly did. I didn't think I was stupid. I didn't, like, tell myself self-deprecating things, nothing like that. My self-worth lack was from far deeper roots. I think it comes from a lot of places. And frankly, to list them all would be to give, like, too much personal information, which I will not do. I think personal and professional should be generally distinct. One place the lack of self-worth originated was my lack of material security or success. You see, I was really good at school growing up. I got straight A's in accelerated classes. I graduated summa cum laude in high school and college. School in the US, at least, teaches you that if you work hard, you get a payoff. And I really don't understand why we teach our kids this way, because, in my humble opinion, it doesn't reflect reality. In school, if you do poorly, it's because of your lack of effort. There's like a direct relationship. You didn't study. You didn't take notes. Skipped class, partied too much, procrastinated, whatever. You didn't go to study hours. Like, your failures in school have a direct proportional relationship to your efforts. But in the real world, you can work full-time and not be able to pay for food and not be able to afford rent, like I had. I was working so damn hard in my roughest patch, but I was drowning. And I felt like a failure for it. And why shouldn't have I? All my life, I got the message, work hard, you get a reward. And I was working hard, but no reward. So I internalized it and thought something must be wrong with me. Maybe I wasn't stupid so much as just bad at living, bad at being an adult. And no matter how much I would rack my brain, I couldn't find a solution. I couldn't just spend all night in a library and get what I needed to win like before. Like before wasn't working. And as you might imagine, being, quote, bad at living, as I thought I was, isn't so great for your self-concept. And you know what? What I started to do? I started playing video games again. Just my two favorites, of course. Which, if you know me, you already know the answer to that. It's Skyrim and Final Fantasy IX. Now, Skyrim, it's just plain fun. And I've been known to download some ridiculous mods that thankfully don't usually crash my game, but are just straight unhinged chaotic garbage, and I thrive on that shit. Which is why I've been playing it for 12 years. But Final Fantasy IX, though, that for me, that one's different. My first exposure to the game was in my early childhood, like way little. I mean, the game came out in 2000, so, you know. My dad would play the game on our PS1, and my brother and I were pretty little, so we didn't have, like, the most full vocab. Like, we could read, but not very fast, and we didn't know, like, every word. So my dad would read all the characters' lines to us, like, all of them. And he would give everybody different voices. And when I do my playthrough, some of them I do specifically because my dad did them that way. And I just love it. When I got older, my dad gave my brother and me the game. And we each have played it so many, many, many times over ourselves. It's kind of been one of the very few constants in my life. As cheesy as it sounds, it's shaped me as a person, truly. You see, the main character, Zidane, like all the other characters, has a quote attributed to him. His is, "You don't need a reason to help people." I loved Final Fantasy IX so much that, like, when I couldn't play because I had kind of strict parents, like I had limited TV time, limited video game time, I couldn't just play games whenever I wanted to. And when I couldn't play, I would just reread the booklet over and over and over again and look at the concept art that's dotted through the pages, and I would read each character's quote like so many times until I could memorize them, which was a goal of mine. And yes, I was a weird little child. But you don't need a reason to help people. That always stuck with me. And it was my creed as much it was this like fictional character Zidane's. After all my shitty experiences, looking at where my life was, realizing I was partly responsible for where I was, realizing that I didn't like my life and I kind of didn't like me. It all leads to this like next natural train of thought, which is, okay, what now? I didn't have any goals. I never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I only picked my major in college as art because I didn't think I was good at anything else. I didn't think I could passably get by doing literally anything else. And it was not a supported decision to major in art. In fact, one family member told me point blank, "You shouldn't do that because you'll be so poor you won't be able to afford box macaroni." Wow, that is such a great thing to say to a young mind getting ready to go out into college and into the world. I took that with, dang, I'm not good at anything else. And this is still not a really great path to go. I don't know what's going to happen. I had, unbeknownst to me, severe undiagnosed dyslexia, which made me a huge failure in like STEM type fields. And if you're wondering like, oh, if you're so bad at all these STEM courses, how did you do great in school and everything? A couple things. One, I was in like kind of a special program, so our courses were structured differently than like your typical schools. I also got really lucky with my math teachers who happened to grade with a curve, which at my school, like teachers, if they did that, it was like up to each individual teacher. There was no standard. And the rest of my classes were all essay-based, so I wasn't screwed over by, like, misreading test questions. I would just, like, turn in papers. And that really helped me out. But anyway, back to my existential impasse. If I don't like my life, do I not like me? After all, I was where I was, based on my responses to my experiences. And those responses were, at least in some way, a reflection of me. What am I left to do? And although I wasn't aware of it at the time, I actually did find my answer. I didn't have any goals. That didn't change. But I did have values. It seemed, probably especially to people on the outside, like they changed so drastically over the decades. But truly, the simplified version of what mattered to me was always at my core. And it should have been more obvious, because I read it so many times that I memorized it. You don't need a reason to help people. Living out my values is, I guess, what replaced having a goal. It may not have been where I wanted. I may not be going anywhere in particular that I can see, but I can live in a way I at least find decent. Back when I was going through the ringer, I really desperately just needed somebody to help me, but for such a long time, I was alone. Sure, I had those, like, friends of convenience, but I didn't have support. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have people looking out for me. And I spent mostly all of my time that, like, wasn't at work completely solitary. I needed somebody to not need any good reason to help me, but to just do it. I needed that, but I didn't have it. And I got to thinking in recent years, how would somebody be qualified to have helped me? Like, what kind of training or teaching would they have needed to get to be of service to what my needs were? I guess a mentor, like, could get mentored by somebody else, potentially, but how far back does that go? Like, where is the originating OG first mentor? Like, this teacher had a teacher who had a teacher who had a teacher. Like, how far back do you go? It can't go forever. It has to start somewhere, right? And I think that's where people who have gone through things like I have come in. We haven't been utterly shattered by our experiences, though it sure can feel like it. We're resilient. We're still standing, in whatever state that may be. I know I don't want anybody else to live like I had to. And for that, I want to be there in whatever small, tiny, insignificant, passing 3-second capacity that I have. I think, honestly, all of our whole lives are the training grounds to be of service to others. If that doesn't sound too much like a weird anime thing. Everybody around us has some more experience in some areas and some less in others. A small conversation with a stranger, or a polite gesture, or just plain being a good listener. That kind of stuff, you don't know what it'll do. I think they're worth a shot though. I think they're worth doing, living, trying out for others. You are never gonna know what I've gone through. And I'm never gonna know what you've gone through. And we don't need to help. If you're breathing, you've been there for you all your life long. And small actions of others they take can be there for us also. Nobody fixes our lives for us or solves our problems. But time is always in flux, and life is ever changing. Everything is impermanent. And I don't know about you, but I find that so relieving. We may not like how things end up, but we can find comfort in the fact that things will be different. And maybe, before you know it, you'll lean back in your chair and look in the room around you at some very important people to you. Things aren't the same as they were before. They're so much better. I don't know how things get fixed, but in my experience, it just seems to me that they just do. If you show up for yourself and just be there for yourself, before you know it, you might just find that your life is kind of nice. Sometimes the juxtaposition of the past helps us see this. Sometimes it's a really fresh breeze on a really plain day. And sometimes it's good, plain quiet. My life is really, really good now. I never could have 5-year planned my way here. And I'm not going to start doing those now. Instead, I am there for me. I care about people. I want to help people. And I know that I am people. I am one of those guys out there that I need to care for and help. Most days, it's going to be just small things. I'm trying to get better at listening to myself. I don't need a reason to do it. I don't have to deserve it, or say the right things, or have the right doctrine, or perform. I don't need a damn reason at all. I just do it. If any part of this resonated with you, or if you think I'm delusional, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you liked it. Maybe I'll do this again sometime. And I say it all at every video for a reason. Be kind to yourself and others. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.